you can see over here. Now, I work with a lot of paper, and I used to work with a lot of paper for my paintings too. And so you may wonder like why I have mine taped down. Well, I actually buy like big, huge rolls of paper, and I cut it down myself. So I get like a versatile mixed media kind of paper that I can use for paint, watercolor, drawing materials. It's just a really nice coarse texture, and I buy like a several yard roll, and then I can cut it to whatever size I want. So as some of you, if you're really serious about going into art and majoring in art, just realize that on websites like Dick Blick, Utrecht, Daniel Smith, there's a lot of online companies that you can buy rolls of like really nice paper. And so that's what I do because it's usually cheaper, and then you can decide what size you want to cut it down to use. So this one that you see up here on my drawing board, it's about 14 by 17. It was really kind of wrinkled because it was rolled up, so I taped it down and kind of spritzed it with water to kind of help stretch it out and flatten it out. So it should be flat enough to work with soon. And what I'm going to do is I plan on drawing my image up here, and then I was going to do a section in ink, a section in acrylic, and then a section in markers, so you could kind of see the look of each one. Now I may not get through with all of that in today's short class, but I'll try to finish it or at least do part of it so you can see what that looks like, and then maybe by Wednesday, that's maybe I'll have time. I never know. My week is like a spinning a wheel to see what's going to happen because our district is changing so much leadership right now, and I'm still sort of filling in because we don't have a dean in my division. But I wanted to show you before I get into it just the different things. So I have some India ink here, and this is a bottle I got on Amazon, and I believe you had a little bottle come in your kit. Probably it looks more like this. This one doesn't have a dropper, so I put some of it in like a little, I think it was like eardrop things that I put in here so I can control it a little bit more. And then I also have, these are some India ink pens. This is a brush pen that comes with cartridges, so I like to use that sometimes along with this. And then I have, this is a India ink brush pen. This one's not refillable, but I really like using it. Then I have just like a pencil to sketch with. And then for the markers I was talking about, this is a brand, it's kind of like Prismacolor, but this brand called Arteza. They have a bunch of different products that I've ordered. Some are, they're pretty good. I haven't found anything that was just absolutely awful, but I saw this. It was 36 gray tones, and I think it was about $20, and I think I had a coupon. So I got all of these markers. They're all different values. On the back, you can see all these different values. So these are really fun, and I actually had some of these Prismacolor ones when I was in college, and I used them quite a bit. So when I saw this big set online for a really inexpensive price, I got these. They're alcohol based, and you can blend them, so they're pretty fun to work with. And then of course I have my black and white acrylic paint, and that's what I'm going to work with. Now for the India ink, normally you use a paint palette, but mine I always end up using like watercolor and watercolor and other stuff with them. I'll show you what those look like. So mine end up getting like pretty gross because I use like liquid acrylic and watercolor and gouache and other things. So I go through of these. If you have one of these are what these are for. Like they're for liquid media like ink or watercolor. So they work great, but I tend to always grab a new one to put color in. So what I do for ink is I buy these eggs that come in these plastic containers, not because I really care that much about the eggs, but more I want this container because you can see I've got all these plastic little wells that I can use. You can also use an ice tray. So if you have like a plastic ice tray, you could use that to mix the different values in too. So I'm going to show you a few different options for that as well. Okay. Now, all right. So what I want to do first before we start painting or doing anything is show you how to work with the grid. And I was kind of torn between these two images to work with. I actually had like about 10 that I emailed myself at like 2 or 3 in the morning last night. But this is one. This was I can't remember her name, but she was a silent film actress that was super famous back in the day, and this was from one of her black and white films. And then this was Julie Andrews from The Sound of Music, which was originally black and white. So um, I wasn't sure which I wanted to use. I think I may go with this one just because of, well, no, I'll probably go with this one because it's got more of a wide range of values. Now, this is going to be obviously a study, so I know this is a copyrighted image. I'm not going to claim it as my own or say that I, created this actress that was alive a long time ago. So there is an academic kind of license that we have as students and educators, and you can always call something a study. So, that's the difference, is that some people get confused with whether something's a master study or you're emulating someone's work trying to improve versus where you're trying to rip it off. Now, if I painted this and I was telling people, no, I came up with this originally all on my own, this is a character I had in my mind, and then someone went online and found this image, obviously online, and that's plagiarism, right? So if you ever do a study or reference images or anything like that, you need to somehow allude to that in your title and just be honest with it, or change it enough that it doesn't really resemble that anymore. But for this is a study. This is a value study for this class, and so we're not going to be, mass producing it or trying to make profit off of it or anything like that. Okay. Now, I was doing some math late last night, and I am a art teacher, but I did take a lot of math classes in high school, but I am not a math teacher. So that's probably one of the things I get frustrated with more than anything, is trying to explain, math and measuring to students, because to me, it's something I always learned how to do. So sometimes I'm kind of confused when students don't know how to do some of these things. So if our paper is 14 by 17 inches, then neither one of those numbers really have that many numbers in common that they could be divisible by. In fact, I think 17 is a prime number. So what I did is I'm like, well, I can take an inch off of the 17 and make it 14 by 16. And then if I divide them both by 2, I get 7 by 8. So if I have a 7 by 8 photo that I put into a 1-inch grid on my paper, I could do a 2-inch grid, and that would help me enlarge it. Okay, so what I'm going to do on my photo here is, and I actually didn't print it the right size. Let me see. I thought I printed it. Let me see. I can print another one real fast. And for some reason, it's not wanting to fill the page with the image. So I may have to figure out another. I got a new computer recently, so I'm used to using my Mac, and this is an HP. So let me just do some math real fast, and we'll figure it out. So Okay, so I figured out if I trim my photo down to 5 inches by 4 inches, and then do a 4 by 5 inch grid on it, then that will allow me to do a 15 by 12 inch piece of paper with a 3 inch grid. Okay, so that probably will make more sense once I get started. So if you want to use my measurements, I'll draw this out and I'll send you all like the specifics for how to do that. You're always welcome to freehand it. I do teach drawing, and in my drawing classes, I have students just do their best to draw from observation. But I know in this class, it's hard to grasp a lot of these different concepts all at once. So I wanted you to have some way of kind of working with the grid if you need it. So what I'm going to do is measure 4 inches up on this photo, and I'm going to cut off some of the top part because it's mostly just a dark background. I think the focus will be primarily on the face, so I'm going to measure up from 4 inches on the bottom and make a mark here, and then I'm going to measure up 4 inches on this side, because you always want to measure 2 points to get a straight line. So measure across here, and then 5 inches going the other direction. So I'm going to measure 5 inches from here, and I think this is going to be a nice, good section and of the photo. So I measure 5 inches on that side, and then I'm going to measure 5 inches on this side, connect those. All right, so you can see it's going to be just this little area that I'm going to be enlarging to this paper. Okay, so now what I'm going to do with a pencil still, just so I don't make any mistakes, because I haven't had any coffee or anything yet since I woke up. So I'm going to measure every 1 inch on each side, and then I'm going to connect those with a marker just to create that 1 inch grid. And using grids and projectors and things like that, they date back to even like ancient times. People use like different measuring devices, such as like the fist or the human head, to measure out things. But even during the Renaissance, they used machines such as like a camera obscura, which is kind of like a camera that didn't take pictures, but it helped them find nice compositions. And a lot of artists still today use projectors and things like that. At the school, we actually do have a projector, and normally for this assignment, I would, bring it out in class and show you all how to use it. But I don't even have a projector. It's like several $100s. I don't even have one of those at home. I don't do a lot of, photorealistic work. So, and plus, even if I did, I kind of like to do things freehand most of the time. So whatever you do, so now I'm just connecting all those 1 inch marks. But whatever you do, whatever tools that you use with your work, you always want to be honest about it. I have students that ask me, they're like, well, if I use a projector, do I need to tell people, And I'm like, well, if they're asking you, did you draw this freehand? No, you didn't. So it just depends on where you want to be with your own morality. I know some friends that are more photorealistic painters, and I know some of them will like use projectors the whole time they're working. And I've heard them tell people like, "Oh yeah, I do it all by hand," and I'm like, that's not entirely true. But it just depends on the artist. I think it's always best to be honest, though. So by doing this grid, it's going to give us an easy way to kind of look at each square in our photo and then each square in our drawing. and it's going to allow us to enlarge it. Okay, so I have a 5 by 4 inch grid on my image now, and then I usually will kind of fold over any excess so that I'm not distracted by that when I'm drawing. Okay, so now I just need to enlarge that so it's 4 by 5 inches. Now I need to enlarge that to my paper that's up here. Okay, so let me move all this out of the way. All right, so up here, I didn't really measure this area. This paper was so wrinkled, it was rolled up, so it was kind of buckling. So I just started taping away. So I'm going to just start from one side. This doesn't look quite straight. And hopefully this will be somewhat of a straight angle. So what I'm going to do is with my pencil, and actually I think I'm going to lay this flat. I need a bigger desk for, but I think I would have to have a bigger room to see. Alright, so let's see if you can see what I'm doing here. Alright, so on this side from the top corner, I'm going to measure, so my image is 5'4" inches, and so I'm going to multiply that times 3. So the 4-inch side of the photo, 4 times 3 is 12. So I'm going to make a mark here at 12. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. Then I'm going to connect those two. And I'm doing all this in pencil because we do want to be able to erase or not see these lines once we're done. And then for the long side, for the photo, it was 5 inches, and I'm doing a 3-inch grid. So that means it's going to be 5 times 3, which would be 15. Okay, so from the edge of this tape here, I'm going to measure 15 inches. So you will be able to cut, if you use the same measurements that I do, you'll be able to trim down that 14 by 17 paper a little bit, a couple of inches. So I'm at the top, I'm doing the same thing. It helps if you have a flat surface to work on. Okay, so this should be a 12 by 15 inch rectangle now. So now since I multiplied this by 3, that means my grid on this is going to be every 3 inches. So I'm going to use my smaller ruler to make the lines because it's a little bit easier to control. So every 3 inches, I'm going to make a mark. So 3 inches, 6 inches, 9, and then 12 at the end. And then on this side, same thing. I'm lining it up at 0, making a mark at 3 inches, 6 inches, and 9 inches. And then on the long side, this is going to be, again, every 3 inches. So 3, 6, 9, 12, and then the last one is 15. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the top. So 3, 6, 9, and 12. All right, so now I'm just going to connect those lines with a ruler. And then do the same for the other side. Okay, so now I have on here a 5x4 grid, and these are each 3 inches. So now I have my photo, and so we can see the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now what I see in each little square, I'm going to draw in all of these squares. And what I plan on doing is I'll do probably a row in each medium that I have. So I was going to do some in ink, some in acrylic, and then some in the marker that I have. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to work with those different materials. So I guess what I can do for enlarging it, you're just going to look at, sorry, I'm trying to get this at the right angle. So you can just look at each little square that you see and try to draw what you see. I wouldn't draw, every single detail just right in the beginning. I would probably just kind of loosely sketch it out first, just to see how everything is looking. So this is a great way to enlarge stuff and get things fairly accurate if you don't really have the best drawing skills at this point. You can also take my drawing class as well. I teach it every semester, including the summer. And I know some of you in here have taken it, so feel free to freehand it if you would rather do it that way, but I'm not going to judge you if you use a grid to help speed along the process a little bit. Okay, so I think I have enough down, but you could see how fast that was to kind of just sketch out the general area of this. So now that I have my area sketched out, and if I were you, if you've never done anything like this before, I would probably draw a few more details here and there for you, and then the rest is going to be just filling it in once you get your values made. So let me show you. I'll show you those markers first, and how to work with those. So these markers come in a variety of different temperatures. So they have cool and warm, and it looks like it's kind of two kind of cool, value gradations, and then one kind of warmer one. So I usually will just pull out a tray that has a good variety, and I think I've kind of mixed them up some, and then usually what I do is looking at the caps, and I'll choose like one that's really dark. So like this one says like deep blue gray, and then I'll choose kind of a middle to dark shade, and then I just choose a few that gradually get lighter, and then work with those. So you can see, just looking at the marker caps here, it goes from dark to light. So I usually don't use more, like I'll kind of choose like 5 different values, and then I will try to use just those, so I don't get, I don't have too many options to work with. Okay, so for this upper left-hand corner here, I'm just going to drag this photo here. So in this upper left-hand corner, I can see the background is fairly dark, and so I can come in and there's a little bit of this kind of highlight shape here that I'm going to sketch out, and then a little bit of line over here too. The rest of this is pretty much all a darker value. What I like about these markers is they don't really streak. It'll look like they're streaking a little bit, but as the alcohol evaporates, you'll see that kind of go away. And then in the head wrap that the the actress is wearing. I do see some kind of darker tones in a few places, but then they kind of fade out. So then I'm going to come in with one of the lighter ones and kind of blur this edge. And these markers come in two tips, like they have a chisel tip and then they have a finer point tip, if you were wondering. And then I'm going to just draw in. Now you have to remember to leave the white of your paper for any highlights that you see. But I will show you a little trick if you need to get those back. Another tool that you might find helpful. So I'm working from light to dark. I like to do that when I'm working with values, because you can always get darker, but you can't always get it light again. So you can see I'm just putting in these different values as I see them, and this part is just the head wrap of the actress, so it's not super. I don't have like super refined details that if they're a little off, it's not going to be noticeable. Right. So you can see you can get a pretty good range of values with these markers, and then you can also kind of blend them out. Now the little trick that I was talking about was these little jelly roll. I think the brand is Sakura. It's a Japanese brand gel pen, and you can get these at Michael's now, and I think they sell them at Daiso also. And these are super opaque, and so if you did get too dark, you can actually come back over onto your drawing, and you can, once it's dry, I think this is a little wet still, but it will actually cover up and you can get some of those white highlights back if you have like really fine highlights that you needed to add in there. So I wanted to show you that too. Now I would only do this for the ink or the markers. This won't mix with probably acrylic. It probably won't right on top of that. But you can see it does allow you to kind of put in more details in case you get the white of your paper dirty. So this would be a better option than using whiteout, which I've had students do before. Okay, so those are those grayscale markers. Next, I'm going to show you how to work with the India ink, and and we'll do a little section in that as well. Now, I'm just going to show you today how to create different values. I'm going to put this paper underneath this so you can see a little bit better. But I want you to realize, like, I'm going to show you a lot of other India ink techniques. I've actually done another video where I show all sorts of things you can add to the ink and like different techniques you can use. And so I'll share a link to that demonstration as well. So if you want to see more India ink techniques, that you'll be able to do that. But today I'm just going to show you really how to work with a brush and how to create those that different range of values. Okay. So again, I believe this is. Let me double check. Yeah. So this is just pure black ink, India ink that I used from this. I put it in this tube so I could control the drops a little bit more. And then I have one of water also that I'm filling up right now. So India ink is super, super pigmented and black, and when it's wet, it's water soluble. And once it's dry, it stains the paper. So the way that you create different values is by diluting it. And the way you dilute it is with water. So what I usually do is I will take my dropper and I will put like one drop in a well, and then I usually do odd numbers. Then like 3 drops in a well. That's 5. 7. I'm gonna just add a couple more, and then 1, 2, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then I usually just do one with quite a bit of just black, so I can just use that. And so now I'm going to then fill all of these to the same level with water, and then that's going to dilute it and make the values. So now I'm going to come back in with the water, and you want to try to fill them up to the same point. So if you have a hard time measuring things, you may want to put a little mark like inside of each one to know to fill it to that point. And I know you're probably like, well, is that going to be enough ink? It goes a really long way. So don't worry about that. You're going to have plenty of ink. You'll probably have a lot left over actually. Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure they're all at the same level, because if you don't fill them to the same level, it's not going to dilute it the right way. All right. And then I usually find a stick or something that I can stir them with to make sure they're all mixed together. And I always start with the lightest value first. Because if you start with the lightest and then go over, then it will gradually, get darker. But if you go from a dark one to a light one, then it's going to change the value of that one. Okay, so now I usually test them on a piece of paper. And you can make as many different ranges. I made 6 different values, and so you could do more than that if you want. But I think 5 or 6, values from light to dark will be, plenty, including the white of your paper. So here I'm going to take a little bit of the light one and put it down. You can see how light it is on the paper. Then I'm going to go to the next darker one. You can see that was just a couple drops more, and you can see how much darker it is. Then the next one, next one, and then that's the pure black ink. So you can see it gradually gets darker. And so what you do when you paint with this is you always start with the lighter values first, and then you put those down, and then you gradually add darker ones. Now, with this ink, you will see if I put down a lighter value and then I put the darker value next to it, they're going to blend together. So you want to do the light values, let it dry, then do the next one, then do the next one, and let it dry between each one so that they do not blend together. And the other video I share with you, I'll show you different techniques that you can use, like using sticks to dip in it and draw with, toothbrushes, other materials that you can use to create other types of effects. So I would watch that video because it'll show you a lot of extra stuff that you may want to use for your design. There's also ways you can wet the paper first and then put the ink on it, and it will blend out on its own. So depending on the imagery that you have, there may be some of those things that you choose to do to create those values that you want or need in your design. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is rinse this brush off. Okay, and then now that I have these values, I'm going to try to do this area here in my drawing. So for this, with the India ink, you're probably going to draw all the different areas out because you're going to need to know where to put what value. And it should allow you to erase it later. Okay, so I'm going to start and kind of go back and forth between the top and bottom so that they can kind of draw in between each one. So the background, again, it's really dark. So I'm going to use the darker ink up here. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and put all the darker values in first. I know I said I like to work light to dark, but I think this will help me since I have already started it with the marker on the other side with getting things to match up. And this is just like a folded headscarf, so it's it's not entirely important that I get like every detail perfect, but you still want to make sure that you capture that illusion of it being three-dimensional, because that's what, remember, we talked about with value. That's one of the cool things about value is that it helps create a sense of volume or form. Okay, so since I started up here, this part is already dry, so I can go in and um, clean my brush, and then I'm going to go in with the um, lighter value on the edge here. So I just wanted to see how this looks for the skin. I think this looks pretty good. You can always get darker, so I always like to test it first, and then if I need to gradually get darker later, I can. Now you're going to use all one medium. I'm just using, like, I did marker and then I did ink, and then I'll use acrylic paint in one, just so I wanted you all to be able to see how these things look different. So you're not going to have to use a different medium for each one like I am. So just pick whichever one you want to use. If you have extra time, of course you can try more than one medium if you would like. Sometimes I have students that will do one in acrylic and then they'll try one in India ink and just kind of see which one that they prefer. All right, and then I think I just have a couple more areas that I need to get darker, so I'm going to use just the pure black ink, and I see right along the edge of the headscarf there's a pretty dark outline. See, this is what I was talking about with, sorry, I'll be right back. Let me make sure my dog's. Okay, sorry about that. But you can see, I don't know, how this was still a little wet. Do you see how it's bleeding a little bit? So I did that partly on purpose just to show you to be patient. It's not a big deal. It was almost dry here, so it didn't bleed too much. But you do want to make sure that it dries if you don't want that to occur. But sometimes, depending on your um, the imagery you're using, if there is kind of some blending like that, you could do that on purpose. So I'm coming in where I see some of the darker values and putting some of those in. And then the background wasn't quite dark enough, so I'm going to come back in with a little more ink there as well. Okay, so I mean the ink is pretty, I mean it's easy to work with because it is so transparent and you can gradually just keep getting darker and darker. And when it dries, it's permanent, so you can add more layers on top of it. You can't erase, however, so if you need to get lighter again, you know, the best thing you can do is just try to keep those areas of your paper clean. But then you could also use, like I said, one of these like gel pens if you had to add any really bright details in case you make a mistake. They do sell stuff called masking fluid or Frisket that's used with watercolor and ink that you can paint all the white areas first and it seals them. And then when you're done, you can peel it off. And I think I show how to do that in some of in the other video that I will post. Okay, so that's how you make the different values using India ink, and you can see it's pretty fast. Most students prefer to use India ink than anything else because you can see it's flat and it absorbs into the paper. Where the acrylic is gonna, you'll see it will stand up on the paper more and create kind of a texture if you're not careful. So if you've never worked with like really acrylic or ink or any of this stuff before, I would advise you to try the India ink, if anything, or you know the markers if you have those. But if you have acrylic, you can make that work too. But some students usually have more of a challenge with acrylic versus the ink. Okay, so let me move this stuff out of the way, and I'm going to show you how to create the values with acrylic paint. Okay, so for acrylic, you have to mix your different grays. So I'm using golden open paint. You could use any just black and white acrylic paint that you have available. They should all work for whatever it is you're doing. So again, you only will choose India ink, acrylic, or markers. Like you wouldn't use them all mixed together like I'm doing. I'm just doing this to kind of show you how each one works. Okay, so with ink, I mean with paint, you're going to mix them together, and the best way to do that is with palette knives. So I'm going to use these to mix the paint together, and I'm going to show you a way to get the full range of value that will give you a nice gradation and where you can't make a mistake. Okay, so on one end of this palette paper, if you don't have palette paper, you could use like a paper plate, but with acrylic you want a flat surface because it is like a thicker paint, and so you don't want wells, you want a flat surface to be able to mix your colors on. And then on the other side, I'm going to put a dab of the black paint. All right, so to make the different grays, what I'm going to do is first take a little bit of the black and put it in the middle, and then I'm going to take some of the white and I'm going to put that in the middle, and then I'm going to take those and hopefully that will give me a nice middle gray. And a lot of people with paint, they get scared to mix the colors, but it doesn't, acrylic paint doesn't dry that fast unless it's just really thin. So you can really flatten it out to mix it and then scrape it back up and pile it back up so it doesn't dry out. So you want to mix it until you don't see any streaks. So I'm just piling it up now. Alright, so now I have white, gray, and black, but we're going to need more of a range than that. So I'm going to take a little bit of the gray and put it over here. And then I'm going to take some of the gray and put it right here. And then I'm going to take some more of my white and I'm going to add it to this gray here to make a light value between the middle gray and the light gray. And then this way you'll know it will fall in between these two. So if you were like me, a lot of us, we were just taught, we'll just add a little bit more white. But if you mix the middle value and then mix it with the other extremes, then that's going to give you a more accurate, chemically speaking, mixture. So it will have to fall somewhere in between. All right, and then on this side, I'm going to take a little bit more black and I'm going to add it to this gray to make a little bit darker gray. Okay. And so now I have black, a dark gray, a middle gray, a light gray, and then white. So I have a full like 5 range of values that I can work with in my piece. So now I'm going to up here and I'll just continue with this area that I've been working on and continue with this little headscarf, and I'm just going to draw out some of the highlights and shadow areas just to make sure that it all looks right. And then with the paint, you'll just use brushes, and I prefer to use like a pretty stiff um, acrylic brush. And there's different tip brushes for different reasons. So if you need to get into a small area, you would use a pointed brush, and if you need to fill a large area, you could use a flat brush to do so. So I'm going to take a little bit of the black, and I'm going to put that in the background because it's pretty dark in that area. Now, if your paint starts to get kind of sticky or you feel like it's drying out, you can take like a little water bottle and just like lightly mist it. You don't want to add too much water to it or it will break it down. But if it does start to dry out, you can just mist it with water. Acrylic paint is water-based, so that's really nice because it will stay water soluble while you're working with it. And then when it dries, it turns into plastic. So it is nice. But if it gets on your clothes and stuff, it's going to, remember, it's going to turn into plastic. So you can clean it up while it's wet. But if it dries, you're going to be in trouble because it's kind of permanent after that point. Okay. So now I'm going to come in, and wherever I see kind of a lighter gray, I'm going to put that value in. And if you find the paint's not flowing, if it's too sticky, you can dip your brush in a little water too and kind of mix it around with the paint, and that will help it flow a little bit more. Now, if it's on a canvas, I usually don't add too much water to my paint because we need it to really stick to the surface. But with on paper, it's kind of staining the paper too, since our paper isn't primed or anything. So it's going to work really well, even if it is watered down somewhat on the paper. So I'm just kind of working. I did the dark background, and then I'm letting that dry, and then now I'm just working on some of the other values that I see. So now I'm moving to like the next darker value for those areas. And you can really layer the paint. That's part of what I love about acrylic is you can really layer it and um, work with building up different. When we get to color, I'll show you more of that. But you can layer like different transparent layers of color and get some really cool effects with acrylic that can mimic other types of paint that take forever to dry, like oil paint, things like that. All right, and then now I'm going to come in and put in the darker values that are kind of separating these folds. So you can see all of them, we're still working with value, just different media. So it's going to be up to you to choose what you feel most comfortable with or what you have on hand. And you can see it is working from square to square like this. It does take quite a bit of time. And so you are going to want to plan ahead, make sure you have plenty of time, and you'll have to account for, drying time as well. So just keep all of that in mind, as you're working throughout the week. And then this part was the skin tone, and I'm going to fill that in. And then there's part of the eyebrow that comes in here. Now with the acrylic, it's not going to bleed. So that's one cool thing about it is you can, if the paint's thin enough, you can actually come back in and put another color on top of it, and it's not going to do anything. All right, so I'm almost through here.
Mr. Dyer,
Yeah.
on that Secura pen that you used for, correcting highlighting and that sort of thing, is that better to use a fine point or something a little like a medium?
I've never, when I order them, they all just say like 08 on them. So
Okay.
I haven't found them. I haven't seen them in any different tips. So you may, I mean, if you wanted a finer line, you could probably look for one. But so far, all the ones, because I probably buy 5 or 6 of these a year, and they've always been the same thickness. So I'm not sure if they. That's a good question. I don't know if they come in different thicknesses though.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. So you can see I still have some kind of blending and stuff to do in the acrylic one, and you could definitely see that I capture the different values in each one, but they all kind of have their own look too. So versus the alcohol markers to the India ink to the acrylic, and I was kind of adding water to the acrylic, so it looks a little bit more like the India ink, but maybe a little cooler compared to the warm tones that you see in the ink. But you do have to be careful about getting too thick with the acrylic, or it will start to build up texture. And you probably don't want that, especially if you're going to need to paint over. Now, I still need to paint in like the highlights, and then I still have some more middle values in here. So again, if you've never worked with any of these before, I think India Ink's probably the one that most people take to more naturally because it's just really flat, it dries really quick, and it's kind of like watercolor, and most of us have used watercolor, at some point as a kid. So anyway, so it's up to you to choose whatever you want. you can see it didn't take me too long to do, 3 areas. And some areas, there's parts of my image where there's not a lot going on. So obviously I could use bigger brushes for those areas. And then once you kind of get it all, you're going to be using the same medium. So once you kind of get it all filled in, you don't have to go square by square. Like, if I was doing this all in ink, I know anywhere that I would see kind of these middle grays in the complexion of her face, I could kind of paint that all in probably at once. I was just doing section by section to show you the different media and how they looked on the paper. Okay, so I'll see. I don't know my weeks, or I never know how busy I'm going to be with different committee work and things like that that come up. But if I have time, I'll try to work on this some more and kind of finish out a row at least of each medium so you can kind of see what it looks like as they kind of connect more together. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And you can see, please go back and look at those examples that are on eCampus, and I'll share this video link, and I'll also share a video link where I show more India ink techniques if you're interested in seeing more of those. That because I show cool techniques where you can add like salt to the ink and alcohol and things like that that makes it do different kind of things that are kind of fun, that depending on your imagery there may be an area that you could do something like that. You can use like a toothbrush in the ink and kind of get to get kind of like a spray paint look effect. So sometimes with these older films you kind of will see like a grainy gradation, and so you may want to use some of those techniques if you choose to use the ink. Okay, so did anybody have any other questions?
I'm good, thanks.
You're good. All right, well, sorry it took me a minute to get it all together. It's always having to print images and stuff like that. It's always a little tricky doing it from home versus at work where I'm used to being. But I'll post kind of those instructions on how to use the grid for you all to if you wanted to use the similar size and kind of explain that. Okay. And Wednesday I'll be here to answer any questions. And if you get started and you want me to look at and see how it's going, then I'm happy to do that on Wednesday. All right. So enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you have a good week, and I look forward to seeing your finished projects.